Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, am I really living as myself? Or just performing a version of me someone once expected? The strong one, the stable one, the one who always knows what to say, what to do, what to carry. You didn't choose that role. It was given to you by your family, your partner, your trauma, or your past. And the most dangerous part, you wore it long enough that you forgot it was a mask. This isn't about drama. It's about spiritual exhaustion. The kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. The kind that follows you from relationship to relationship. The kind that makes you wonder if something is fundamentally wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with you. You're just carrying a weight that was never yours to bear. The truth is simple yet profound. You will never find peace until you let go of the role they gave you. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become that person when your life is built on being what others need you to be? In this video, we'll explore how unconscious archetypal roles, like the hero, the caregiver, the achiever, take over your identity. We'll talk about how these roles are formed, how they slowly drain your soul, and what it really means to walk away from them, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally remembered you exist beyond what you offer. Jung wrote that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Today, we're going to look inward together. We'll explore how the roles you've been given or have taken on might be the very thing blocking your path to wholeness. These roles aren't just behaviors. They become prisons of identity, locking away parts of yourself deemed too messy, too much, too real for the world to handle. What if the exhaustion you feel isn't just physical, but the weight of carrying a self that was never truly yours? Stay with me. This journey might be exactly what your soul has been waiting for. You're the one who has it together. The reliable friend, the dependable partner, the essential employee. You carry the emotional weight for others. People praise you for your strength, your resilience, your ability to handle whatever comes, but no one sees how exhausted you are, because you've been trained not to let it show. This mask forms in childhood, especially in chaotic families, where being useful equals being loved. Perhaps you had a parent who was emotionally unstable, physically absent, or simply overwhelmed, and you, as a child, learned quickly your needs were too much, your emotions were inconvenient. So you adapted. You became smaller in some ways, bigger in others. You learned to perform stability so no one else would have to. Jung called this a false self, an adaptive strategy that, over time, becomes mistaken for your true identity. The capable one isn't just a role you play. It's who you believe you are. And every time someone says, "I don't know what we'd do without you," the mask tightens. Every time someone remarks, "You're always so together," the deception deepens. You're living in what Jung's called persona identification, where the social mask becomes fused with the ego. Jung wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. Fittingly enough, a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. This mask served you once. It protected you. It gave you a way to navigate a world that felt unsafe for your authentic expression. But what begins as protection becomes a prison. What once kept you safe now keeps you small. Think of it as a suit of armor you've worn so long that you've forgotten. It's not your skin, heavy, restrictive, keeping danger out, but also keeping your true self locked inside. The truth? Beneath your capability lies a profound longing to be held, supported, seen, not for what you do, but for who you are. Have you considered what it would mean to let yourself be imperfect? To ask for help, not because you've reached a breaking point, but simply because you're human. Take a moment and reflect on this. How would your relationships change if you showed up as your whole self, not just your capable self? This isn't selfishness. It's a reclamation of the self that existed before. The world told you who to be. Jung understood that true individuation requires courage, the courage to disappoint others, to be misunderstood, to stand in your own authority rather than constantly deferring to external validation. As we move forward, consider this. The very adaptations that once saved you are now the prison keeping you from yourself. Let's explore how this prison was built, brick by brick, starting with the wound of the good child. Jung believed our earliest identity is shaped not by freedom, but by adaptation. The good child learns to be quiet, easy, and impressive. This isn't just about strict parents or explicit rules. It's about the silent expectation that your worth depends on how comfortable you make others feel. Maybe you were the emotional caretaker in your family. Maybe you were the academic achiever, bringing home the accomplishments that gave your parents pride. Maybe you were simply the one who didn't cause trouble, who didn't add stress to an already stressed household. Whatever form it took, the message was clear. Conditional love. Be this way, and you are worthy. Fail, and you are not. Jung wrote about how the child's psyche develops not in isolation, but in relationship. He observed that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived lives of the parents. Consider what this means. The roles you were given often reflect what others could not be or express themselves. The parent who never felt significant might push you to achieve. The parent who never felt safe might need you to be eternally stable. The parent who never felt heard might require you to listen endlessly. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's unconscious projection, what Jung called the transmission of the shadow from one generation to the next. The good child learns to suppress their authentic needs, emotions, and expressions. They become masters at reading rooms, anticipating needs, and morphing themselves to fit expectations. This shape-shifting becomes so automatic that you lose track of your own contours, where you end and others begin. This isn't manipulation. It's survival, and you carry this obedience into adulthood, at work, in relationships, even in silence with yourself. You say yes when you mean no. You stay silent when something hurts. You push past exhaustion because rest hasn't been earned. You apologize for needs because they were once inconvenient. Jung observed that these childhood adaptations become unconscious patterns, forming what he called complexes, emotional energy concentrated around a specific theme. The good child complex continues to operate long after it's needed. You find yourself unable to say no, unable to disappoint, unable to choose yourself when others need you. You mistake obedience for love, performance for connection. But as Jung wrote, the unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good. Not only dark, but also light. Not only bestial, semi-human and demonic, but superhuman, spiritual, and in the classical sense of the word, divine. Your suppressed authenticity hasn't disappeared. It waits beneath the surface, the true self longing to emerge. What parts of yourself did you hide away to be accepted? What voice did you silence to keep the peace? Pause here. Think about how you might reclaim just one of those hidden parts today. Sometimes, the smallest act of authenticity creates the biggest shift within. Obedience is not the same as peace. It's a performance in disguise. And this performance creates a particular kind of wound, one that often transforms into something even more consuming. the need to rescue others. This role is seductive, the one who fixes, who rescues, who holds others up. The healer, the helper, the solver of problems. It feels noble until you realize you're drowning too. Jung warned about shadow projection. We help others not just out of care, but because we're avoiding our own unhealed parts. The savior complex isn't just about being kind or supportive. It's about finding identity in being needed. It's feeling valuable only when you're solving someone else's problem. It's believing somewhere deep down that if you stop giving, you'll stop mattering. Jung understood this pattern well. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But in the savior dynamic, only one person is allowed to be in process. Only one person gets to be messy, uncertain, or in need. You must remain the stable one, the wise one, the one with answers. And every time you save someone else, you avoid saving yourself. You bypass your own healing journey by focusing on theirs." Consider the archetype of the wounded healer, a pattern Jung recognized where those who heal others are driven by their own unhealed wounds. This isn't inherently negative. Some of our greatest gifts emerge from our deepest wounds. But when unconscious, when unacknowledged, those wounds don't transform into wisdom. They leak into every relationship, creating subtle codependence disguised as generosity. This creates what Jung called psychic inflation, an over-identification with the archetype of the healer or hero that separates you from your whole humanity. You become not just someone who helps, but the helper, a fixed identity that leaves no room for your own vulnerability or need. You might recognize this pattern when you feel inexplicably drawn to people in crisis. You sense others' needs before they express them. You feel guilty when taking time for yourself. You're uncomfortable receiving help or care from others. You feel secretly superior in your role as the together one. The painful irony? Your constant helping often enables others to avoid their necessary growth. Your solutions prevent them from finding their own. Your strength robs them of developing theirs. Jung observed this dynamic in his clinical work, noting how families often unconsciously assign roles. The sick one, the strong one, the successful one, that become prisons for all involved. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be the one in need? To be supported rather than supporting? To receive rather than give? If you can't remember, that might be your sign. The savior complex creates not just exhaustion, but a profound loneliness. Because while people appreciate what you do, they rarely see who you are. They relate to your function, not your essence. And this brings us to a critical distinction that Jung emphasized throughout his work: the difference between the archetype and your essence, between the universal pattern and your unique soul. The problem isn't the role, it's the identification with the role. Jung's concept of archetypes helps us understand this distinction. Archetypes are universal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious. The hero, the mother, the wise one, the caregiver. These patterns exist across cultures, throughout history, manifesting in myths, dreams, art, and human behavior. Jung wrote, "The archetype is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived, and it takes its color from the individual consciousness in which it happens to appear." In other words, while the pattern is universal, your expression of it is unique. We all carry these archetypal energies. They move through us and express themselves in our lives. But when we confuse the pattern with the person, we lose ourselves. You are not the strong one. You are not the smart one. You are not the responsible one. You are the one behind the image, the one you forgot how to be. Consider how this plays out in daily life. Mother who becomes so identified with the mother archetype that she has no identity outside of nurturing others. A man who becomes so identified with the hero archetype that he cannot acknowledge vulnerability or need. A therapist who becomes so identified with the healer archetype that they believe they must always have answers. This possession by an archetype isn't metaphorical. It's a psychological reality. The archetype takes over, and your unique essence becomes obscured. Jung wrote, "The unconscious wants to flow into consciousness in order to reach the light. But at the same time, it continually thwarts itself because it would rather remain unconscious." This is the tension we live in, between the comfort of our familiar roles and the discomfort of authentic becoming. The archetypal role feels safe. It's clear, it has rules and boundaries. Your essence is wilder, more mysterious, more unpredictable. Your essence contains contradictions. You can be both strong and vulnerable, both wise and foolish, both giving and receiving. Your essence isn't defined by what you provide to others. It simply is. Jung believed that the journey to wholeness, what he called individuation, requires differentiating between the archetypal roles we play and our unique essence. It means recognizing when you're acting from a script versus when you're expressing your authentic self. For example, are you listening because you're genuinely curious or because you're playing the good listener role? Are you helping because you're genuinely moved to assist or because being the helper is your identity? Are you achieving because the work brings you joy or because the achiever is the only self you know how to be? These distinctions matter. They're the difference between a life of authenticity and a life of performance. Jung observed, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. This is why no role, however noble, can encompass your full humanity. The role that fits perfectly in one context will inevitably pinch in another." In his work with patients, Jung noticed that psychological symptoms often arose when people became too identified with a single archetype, suppressing the complementary energies needed for balance. The overly responsible person develops exhaustion. The perpetual caregiver develops resentment. The constant achiever develops emptiness. These aren't moral failings. They're the psyche's way of demanding wholeness. Pause now and ask yourself, in what areas of my life am I most authentic? When do I feel most alive, most real? And where am I still performing? The path to freedom requires this honest self-assessment because you cannot release what you don't recognize. You cannot heal what you pretend isn't wounded. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means acknowledging the roles that have defined you, how they've served you, and also how they've limited you. As we continue, we'll explore how to begin the delicate process of disidentifying from these roles without abandoning your responsibilities or collapsing into chaos. Because the journey isn't about rejection of all roles, but liberation from unconscious identification with them. Letting go of the role feels like death, because it was the thing that gave you worth, structure, praise. It formed your identity, your relationships, your place in the world. When Jung spoke of the ego, death necessary for individuation, he wasn't describing physical death, but this very process, the dissolution of a false self to make way for the true. This death is not just symbolic. It feels real. There is genuine grief in releasing the role you've played. There's terror in the question, if I'm not that, then who am I? There's the practical fear. If I stop being the strong one, the responsible one, the caretaker, will I still be loved? Will I still belong? Jung understood this fear. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is the pain He meant the disorientation of releasing an identity that, however limiting, was at least familiar. The ego, that conscious part of you that has identified with the role, resists this dissolution. It creates elaborate defenses. They need me to be this way. I can't change now. It's too late. This is just who I am. I'd be selfish to put myself first. These are the stories the ego tells to maintain the status quo, to keep you safely within the boundaries of the known. But as Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. The role they gave you is what happened to you. What you become now is your choice. But peace doesn't live in performance. It lies in permission to be ordinary, flawed, unknown, and still worthy. Disidentification means this: I no longer need to be who you expect just to deserve love. I no longer need to earn my place through endless giving. No longer need to hide my complexity behind a simple role. Jung believed that wholeness isn't perfection, it's the integration of all parts of the self, both light and shadow. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." This doesn't mean becoming selfish or abandoning your commitments. It means bringing your whole self to them, rather than just the parts that have been approved and applauded. It means acknowledging your limits, your needs, your darkness, not as flaws to be overcome, but as essential aspects of your humanity. Jung believed that real morality isn't about perfect performance, but about conscious choice, choosing to serve, to love, to give from wholeness rather than woundedness. The practical path of disidentification involves several steps. First, awareness, noticing when you're slipping into the familiar role, when you're performing rather than being. Second, permission, allowing yourself small acts of authenticity, even when they contradict your usual role. Third, boundaries, learning to say no to expectations that require you to abandon yourself. Fourth, grieving, honoring what the role gave you, how it protected you while consciously choosing to evolve beyond it. This journey isn't linear. You'll find yourself cycling through these steps, sometimes feeling utterly free, other times falling back into old patterns. Jung reminds us, the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. You don't solve the problem of the false role. You outgrow it, gradually, compassionately, through consistent small choices toward authenticity. What small step could you take today toward authenticity? What truth could you speak? What boundary could you set? What need could you acknowledge? As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This privilege isn't granted by others. It's claimed by you, breath by breath, choice by choice. If you're finding value in these insights, take a second to hit the like button. It helps others discover this message who might need to hear it, too. And as you release the roles that have confined you, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your authentic self emerges from beneath the rubble of expectations. When you take off the role, you meet the silence beneath it, and in that silence, something sacred returns. Your own voice, your forgotten joy. The you that doesn't perform, impress, or earn love, but simply is. Jung called this process individuation, the slow, sacred journey back to wholeness. It isn't about reaching perfection. It's about embracing integration, allowing all parts of yourself to exist, to be acknowledged, to be held in conscious awareness. The shadow elements you've denied, the childlike wonder you've suppressed, the full spectrum of your humanity that couldn't fit inside the narrow role you were given. Jung wrote, "The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. Your dreams, both night dreams and daydreams, often point toward this authentic self. Pay attention to what moves you, what brings spontaneous joy, what feels like remembering rather than learning. These are glimpses of your true nature breaking through the conditioning. Through this door lies not just your authentic self, but a profound sense of meaning. Because when you're no longer exhausting yourself, maintaining a false identity, energy returns, creativity flows, purpose clarifies. You discover that your worth never depended on the role at all. It was always there, inherent, waiting to be recognized. Jung observed that the process of individuation often follows a predictable pattern. First comes the confrontation with the shadow, those disowned parts of yourself that were incompatible with your role. If you've been the responsible one, you may discover a playful, spontaneous energy emerging. If you've been the rational one, you might find yourself drawn to art, music, movement, expressions that transcend logic. If you've been the caretaker, you may discover healthy selfishness, boundaries, and the right to your own needs. This rebalancing isn't regression or moral decline. It's the psyche's natural movement toward wholeness. Jung wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." Your emergence from the role isn't a descent into chaos, but an alignment with a deeper, more authentic order. After shadow integration comes the encounter with complementary energies that were suppressed to maintain the role. For those who embraced stereotypically masculine qualities, this might mean reconnecting with emotional sensitivity, receptivity, and intuition. For those who embraced stereotypically feminine qualities, this might mean reclaiming authority, assertiveness, and independence. This isn't about gender in a literal sense, but about the balance of complementary energies within the psyche. Finally comes what Jung called the realization of the self. Not the ego self of daily consciousness, but the larger, more complete self that encompasses both conscious and unconscious elements. This doesn't mean the journey is over. Individuation is ongoing, a spiral rather than a linear path. Jung acknowledged this challenge. There is no linear evolution. There is only a circumambulation of the self. Progress isn't measured by constant forward movement, but by an ever-deepening spiral of self-knowledge. But even in those moments, something has fundamentally shifted. You've tasted freedom. You've glimpsed your true nature, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. The poet David Whyte captures this beautifully. The courageous conversation is the one you have with something that has already changed, but which you have not yet brought fully into your heart. Your authentic self isn't something you need to create or achieve. It's what remains when you stop performing. It's what emerges when you give yourself permission to be human, complex, contradictory, and completely worthy, just as you are. In practical terms, this emergence might look like speaking your truth even when it contradicts your usual role. Pursuing interests that don't make sense according to your previous identity setting. Boundaries that would have seemed selfish from within. The role. Expressing emotions that were previously forbidden. Making choices based on inner resonance rather than external validation. What dreams have you set aside because they didn't fit your prescribed role? What joys have you denied yourself because they seemed frivolous or selfish? As Jung reminded us, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. The role they gave you is what happened to you. What you become now is your choice. What if your exhaustion isn't from doing too much, but from being someone you never truly were? The weight you feel isn't just the burden of responsibilities. It's the burden of a divided self. The exhaustion of living a life that requires you to leave parts of yourself behind. Jung understood that this division creates not just psychological distress, but spiritual alienation, a fundamental disconnection from your own soul. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, yet this acceptance is precisely what brings healing. Not a superficial acceptance that glosses over wounds or ignores shadow aspects, but a profound recognition of your wholeness, the light and the dark, the strength and the vulnerability, the certainty and the doubt. You're not selfish for wanting peace. You're not broken for outgrowing the role. You're not ungrateful for needing something more authentic than conditional approval. You are allowed to exist outside of expectations. You are allowed to disappoint people who only valued your function. You are allowed to discover who you might be when you're not trying to prove your worth through endless giving. This journey isn't about dramatic rebellion or sudden transformation. It's about quiet reclamation, taking back, moment by moment, the self that was always yours. Remember Jung's insight that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Often, the very qualities that frustrate you in others are the shadow aspects you've denied in yourself in order to maintain your role. It starts with small permissions. Permission to rest when you need it, not just when you've earned it. Permission to feel without fixing. Permission to be imperfect, uncertain, still in process. Jung believed that the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. This acceptance isn't resignation to flaws, but recognition of your fundamental worthiness beyond any role, any achievement, any service to others. It's the recognition that you were never meant to be one-dimensional. The strong one, the successful one, the together one. You were meant to be fully human, with depths and contradictions, with needs and gifts, with wounds and wisdom. And as these small permissions accumulate, a different kind of strength emerges. Not the strength of endurance or sacrifice, but the strength of authenticity, the strength to be seen as you are, the strength to speak your truth, the strength to stand in your own authority rather than living by external validation. Jung reminded us, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. This awakening is available to you right now. Not when you've figured everything out. Not when circumstances are perfect. But here, in this moment, with one conscious breath, one authentic choice, one act of self-reclamation. As Jung wisely observed, only that which changes remains true. You are not betraying yourself or others by evolving beyond the role you were given. You are, at last, becoming truthful. What's one small way you could honor your authentic self today? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If you found value in this exploration, consider reflecting on which roles you've outgrown and what might be waiting to emerge in their place. This isn't just personal growth, it's collective healing. Because when one person claims their authenticity, they create space for others to do the same. If this video resonated with you, pause before moving on. Let yourself feel what stirred within you. The path to authenticity begins with this awareness. If you know someone struggling with the exhaustion of constant performance, share this video. Sometimes seeing our struggles reflected back to us is the first step toward healing. What would change in your life if you gave yourself permission to be fully human, with needs, limits, and dreams of your own? Until next time, be who you are, not who they needed you to be.